Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Prindex regional event in the Arabic region. My name is Laura Medjolaro. I'm team leader at the Lamporter Foundation, which is a small Dutch organization that works towards improving access to land-related data and information to all. We provide a free, open, and global open data platform with data and information for an international network of partners, organizations that help making this data visible and available to everyone. I'm here today to facilitate this great webinar about Prindex, which is the Global Property Rights Index, a collaborative initiative between the Global Land Alliance and the Overseas Development Institute that aims to develop and roll out the first global measurement of people's perceptions of their property rights and establish a global and national level baseline of perceptions of land tenure security, and will provide a grounding for a global conversation and movement around secure property rights. In particular, today's webinar is meant to present the result and deep dive of a recent research findings in 13 countries in the Arab region. So in a moment, I will give you the floor to our esteemed panel of experts from the region. Well, I'm just proud to say that the Lamporter is a partner in this webinar, and is also proud to with a collaboration with Prindex for many years, since the first data release in 2016, and then the second and third, until this compelling data report, which was published in 2020 and represents the culmination of over 5 years of work to develop and apply the research methodology for measuring tenure security for land and property in 140 countries around the globe. So the objective of this webinar is to introduce this amazing work that was done to collect and analyze tenure and security in 13 countries in the MENA region, where Prindex data can be used to sustain efforts around sustainable development goals, as well as the implementation of the voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests in the context of food security. So the Lamporter is honored to be partner in this webinar. Without any further delay, and before introducing our esteemed panel of experts, who will present to you the main findings of this research in the Arab region and discuss its possible use and uptake, let me share a little bit of information on this webinar. As my colleague just mentioned, the webinar has Arabic interpretation. So please select the language that is most convenient to you, either English or Arabic. For Arabic, you need to click on French. Use the chat feature to pose your questions to the panelists. After the presentation, very brief presentations from our panelists, we will have a Q&A session at the end. So we try to address all your questions. So the webinar is recorded, both the English track and also the Arabic track, and will be available for you for later consultation, both on the Prindex webinar, website, and also on the Lamporter website. So before introducing all the panelists, let me first give the floor to Shahad Mustafa to present the main findings of the Prindex study in the Arab region. Shahad will present to us the key research and will let us understand what Prindex data finds that is shocking, or what is data is telling out about the Arabic region, how Prindex can be important for the Arab region, for the Arab world, how Prindex data can be used in research, upcoming projects that are in the pipeline. So Shahad is the Prindex coordinator in the MENA region. She's a specialist in refugees and internal displaced people's rights to housing, land and property, with a master's degree in land management and land tenure from the Technical University of Munich. She has 3 years experience in the use of land, innovative tools in land management and land governance. Shahad is also an activist in developing capacity building approaches in the Arab region. Over to you, Shahad.
Thank you very much, Laura, for this nice introduction. I would like also to thank our speakers and our audience for attending the webinar today on behalf of Prindex and Global Land Alliance. I'm honored today to present the first global property rights index, Prindex. If we can start the presentation, please, Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Well, Prindex, the first global property rights index that covers 140 countries, including MENA region, providing for the first time quantified representative data sets about perception of tenure security. Next, Ryan. Our presentation today would be about the MENA region and what can we or what do we want to achieve with these data that Prindex provided us in 2020. Next, please. Since perception is an important pillar in the decision-making, we aim to influence the change in national policies making and national policies design to HLP security. And not just that, we want also to monitor these policies and decision-making to measure their effectivity in reality, contributing by that to tracking and reporting SDG indicators, as well as other indicators like the voluntary guidelines on responsible land governance, among others. Prindex have used a unique methodology to collect this data, mostly face-to-face interviews. These were carried on with random selection of individuals within a household, taking into consideration age, gender, urban, rural, income, etc. These surveys have been carried on in 140 countries, covering by that 96% of the global population through interviewing 150,000 people. Using the core question that is alienated with the SDG indicator 142, in the next 5 years, how likely or unlikely is it that you could lose the right to use this property or part of it against your will? The 4 answers that we gave to the respondents to pick one of them were very likely, unlikely, somewhat likely, and very likely. These answers have, this question have provided us with an answer that is nearly 1 in 5 adults, next Ryan, nearly 1 in 5 adults feel insecure about their land or property rights. That is almost 1 billion people around the globe, which leads us to the key findings in the region. The Arab region has the highest percentage of insecurity in the world with 28%, which is above the average global, which lies by 20%. Let's get into the details a little bit. The overview of the Arab countries shows us a very high percentage in the Arab Gulf countries, especially in GCC countries and in Jordan. Yet we have some outliers with some positive data, like Algeria with 60% insecurity. Well, to have a better understanding, we would like to look into some further details. For example, The tenure types. The Arab region have presented a very high insecurity regarding the tenure types. The renters in the Arab region are the most insecure in the world. Sometimes they are insecure by 10 times more than the owners in the same country, which is the case in mostly in North Africa and Middle East, with some exceptions like the United Arab Emirates. Next, please. The insecurity and gender. Well, there is a very interesting phenomena in the Arab region that in some countries, especially in GCC countries and refugee hosting countries, the men feeling more insecure than women. This could explain by the huge number of foreign workers in these countries or the huge numbers of refugees from conflict countries, which is the situation in GCC, Jordan, and Lebanon. Next, please, Ryan. The women are still the most vulnerable in the MENA region, with most of the women reported insecurity in case of death of spouse and divorce. These reportings are very high in the region, even though Tunisia have took the lead on making some reformation to preserve women's rights. Still, other countries need to take some measures in this regard. Well, as it's all known over the world, usually the urban feel more insecure than the rural. It's also the case in the agricultural based rural areas in the MENA region. Yet we have in some countries like GCC countries quite the opposite, where traditional land are insecure, like in Kuwait, in United Arab Emirates, and in Saudi Arabia, which is quite a phenomena that needs further investigation why traditional land is being abandoned toward urbanization. Last but not least, the documentation in the region. It's already known that those who possess documentation feel more secure than those who don't possess it. But this gap in the Arab region is very big, and many people with no documents reported relatively very high insecurity. And I would like to leave this particular theme to my colleague Ahmed to elaborate on it through his presentation. So now all these key findings and all the data Prindex have brought to the table. What do we do next with these data? Well, having these data, we have to go in depth and we have to investigate and carry on some national level studies, but this is something cannot be done with one person or one organization. This is something could be done only through collaboration and partnership with the active stakeholders in the area, for further research on national level and for thematic research on the different important fields in the region, like conflict, refugees, climate change, and customary tenure. And by this, we can deliver the ambition of Prindex, which is bending the curve of tenure and security in the MENA region among the world. Thank you very much, everyone. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Sahad, and thank you for this great presentation and these insights on how Prindex data can drive change in the region, in the Arabic region, and also inform future land policy and land reform. I'm now going to introduce you our panel of experts. Well, before introducing our panel of experts, let me introduce also Malcolm Childress. He's a Malcolm is a director of and founder of co-founder of the Land Alliance, and is also the co-director of Prindex. Is a multidisciplinary land resource specialist with more than 55 years of global experience, including urban and rural property rights and strategy for managing critical global ecosystems. Malcolm focus area includes land policy, governance, land markets, land registration, property taxation, cadastral systems, and spatial planning. So Malcolm will be kicking off questions to the panelists and also making few remarks throughout the webinar. So welcome, Malcolm. Let me go now to the Yes, let me go now to our 4 panelists for this webinar from our esteemed panel of experts from the World Bank, the Arab Land Initiative led by GLTN, the UTI, as well as independent researchers and land rights experts from the region. Our experts will be speaking about why Prindex data why Prindex is an important source of data for the region, and why it is particularly important as a land governance monitoring tool. And more in general, they will be speaking about the importance of land data and research to enhance tenure security, and how important deep dives into specific countries and into specific research streams help understanding national context and also the tenure and security at country level or at the regional level. So let me first give the floor to Anna Corsi. Anna is a senior land administration specialist at the World Bank. She has 2 decades of experience working on land tenure and administration projects in more than 20 countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And since July, she's very active in the MENA region as well. Before joining the World Bank, Anna worked for the Political and Environmental Affairs Committee of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, in France, and as a lawyer in Italy. So over to you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Laura. Let me first try to share my presentation. If you just give me 1 second.
Anna, sorry to interrupt. Could you move the microphone just a little bit closer?
Yes.
You're coming off a little bit quiet.
Can you hear me better now?
That's much better. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. I'll just try to keep it up there. So I hope that you can see my presentation.
Yes,
we
can.
Okay.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Anna.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Laura. It's a real pleasure to be here today and be part of this webinar, and it's a really exciting launch of the Prindex data. So for the World Bank perspective, today I will try to sort of give a broader perspective of how we see the issues of the land governance and land tenure security globally, and how the MENA region sort of compares to what we see globally. So very quickly, I will go, briefly just to say what, the importance of land and property rights and what are the challenges that we see in the sector. What has been the World Bank engagement on land globally, and specifically in the MENA region? What are the challenges that we see in the MENA region, and some of the options that we can see moving forward? So I think we can all agree that security property rights is really at the core of a modern economy, and is really at the core also of many of the development challenges that we see today. We see, of course, the importance, related to agricultural sustainability and productivity. We see the importance in terms of the housing sector and the provision of affordable housing, importance, to enable the private sector development, definitely importance, for urban development. There's a lot of, with population increasing in density, a lot of pressure on land, and push for urbanization is clearly important, in terms of environmental sustainability, and also for the financial sector and the banking sector. So it's definitely one of the key issues. So what are the challenges that we see globally in the sector? We see that, you know, throughout, not just in the MENA region, but throughout, we see that, you know, land records are really incomplete and overlapping, and often, you know, in paper form. There are often no records or very poor records on public lands and you know, both state and municipal lands. The fact that, you know, there are no records, you know, causes many delays in terms of land acquisition and development infrastructure projects. There's widespread litigation. You know, often we see in many of these countries that, you know, land-related disputes take up a really high percentage of you know, up in the court systems. We see a lot of informalities with, you know, development of many slums around cities, you know, pressures on natural resource management, on forests and parks. There's lots of revenues that are based, you know, on land, and weak governance overall. And we see also that many of the land information systems across, you know, the countries are really in poor state, and therefore, you know, also access to land data and land records is really, you know, is really not there. So in terms of the World Bank engagement on land, I mean, we've been, you know, the World Bank has been very active for, you know, at least 4 decades, you know, globally. You can see that the focus has mostly been in the Europe and Central Asia region, also, you know, Latin America region and in East Asia. There's been a big push lately, you know, in Africa, but as you can see, the engagement in the MENA region is still very, very, very low and very nascent. So how do we address, you know, some of the sectoral challenges that I mentioned before? So typically, you know, our land projects include one of the following activities. We look at the policy and, you know, overall legal frameworks in a country and see what the specific gaps are in there. We look at the institutional and, you know, technical capacity building in the countries. And, you know, this many times, you know, also requires, you know, some institutional structuring merger, specifically, you know, when we look at the land registry and the cadastre side. Definitely a lot of focus on land regularization and registration activities on the ground, which includes, of course, development of cadastral map, but also a lot of attention to women's rights and vulnerable groups' rights. A lot of focus on the land information systems, as I mentioned, is really a key aspect, and the automation of the services and the linkages of the e-services to overall e-government programs. We have a lot of focus also on property valuation, development of mass valuation systems. In many countries, we look at forest tenures, often linked to indigenous peoples' land rights. Attention also to state and municipal property, how to better manage, you know, the assets that the government and the states have, you know, through inventory and development of state property registration. And again, also the, you know, attention to the geospatial aspects and the development of geospatial information infrastructure. So, you know, as I mentioned, you know, we've had engagement over, you know, more than 40 years. I mean, in terms of, you know, some of the best examples, I've just had a few here. Of course, you know, there's many more, but I mean, Thailand definitely, you know, has been one of the first countries that has developed a national wildland entitlement programs. This has spanned over, you know, several years, more than 10 years through 3 projects, but they've been really successful in titling, you know, 22 million parcels, and really making the registration of properties, you know, and the transactions very, very efficient, and they're able to do it in a day. Russia, same thing. It's been, you know, very, very long, you know, it's a long-term program of engagement. It's spanned, again, over almost 20 years. It's 3 projects, and at the end of the day, you know, Russia has one of the largest land administration system in the world. Is very efficient. Turkey, at the same time, has really supported the full modernization of the national cadastre systems there as well. There's started, you know, very early engagement in the 1990s. The program is still ongoing, and they've really managed to cover a lot of the country in terms of, you know, cadastre and registration project. They've covered, you know, almost 30% of the population has benefited for this program. With, you know, at this date, more than 8.5 million parcels updated. Greece as well. This is a more recent engagement, where the World Bank has provided technical assistance and has supported, the modernization of the overall land administration system and the development of a national spatial data infrastructure. So what is the land program of the World Bank in the MENA region? As you saw, it's really still nascent, especially if we compare it to the other regions. We've had several projects in the West Bank and Gaza. There's one project that is still ongoing. And for the rest, there's been a lot of advisory services and technical assistance mostly. So we've covered Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. There's been support for modernizing the property registration system and estate land management in Egypt as well. A much needed modernization of the property registration in Egypt, and here we'll hear it also from the other panelists specifically on that one. We started some engagement in the Mashrek region, again, more in terms of advisory services. And we're also working on a regional flagship on land that we hope, to launch next year, in around October. So what are the specific challenges that we see in the MENA region? So we see that, the legal framework is quite outdated. We see many laws are, from the 1950s and 1960s, sometimes even earlier. In some countries, we see legislation that goes back to the 1920s that is still in force, and so definitely doesn't really reflect the context today. We see institutional fragmentations. There are several agencies that have mandates over land functions, and large percentage of the land is still not registered. The system is still manual systems in papers, and so services to the clients are really not very efficient. The state has a really prominent role in the MENA region, so a large share of the land is still in state ownership, which doesn't always mean that allocation of the land is optimal. There's often a leak capture in the way that land is allocated. Collateral is very, very, is not really used. Access to land is still a major constraint to private sector development. Property valuation is still nascent, is quite underdeveloped, and does not really reflect the market value. This is a region that has witnessed prolonged conflicts, which have created displacement, which undermines, of course, property rights that are essential for the reconstruction efforts and for affordable housing. And as also Shah was mentioning, women land rights is really an issue that we see as the most challenging, especially if we compare to the other regions. So just to give you also a sense in terms of the data, we've used, the World Bank Doing Business Index data. So we see that basically in terms of efficiency of property registration in the MENA countries, it's really varies quite a bit. We see that some of the countries, especially the Gulf cooperation countries, that they're sort of at the top of the ranking, but at the same time, we have many countries in the MENA region that are really at the bottom of the ranking. It's Algeria, Syria, Egypt. They're very, we're measuring 119 economies, and we see a lot of the MENA countries being sort of at the bottom of the ranking. If we look at the quality of land administration, we have a very similar picture with like a few of the GCC countries being at the top of the ranking, with a lot of the other countries in the region, like you see here, the Yemen, Algeria, Syria, and Egypt, again, they're at the very bottom of the ranking. So a lot to do to improve services and land security in the region. So, but why is this so difficult then to reform land governance in the region? And here we see some sort of, broader trend. But first of all, the land sector reform is complicated, is overcomplicated, and is politically very difficult. Of course, there's several, like in any reform, there are winners and losers, but when it comes to land, of course, there are many vested interests that, do not have any interest in the reform. Often these are political and economic elites, and, what we see in the MENA region is also military. They take advantage of the system and the fact that there is no transparency and to access state land. Overall, we see a lack of social economic reform program. I'm sure other colleague of mine, will talk about this also, about the fact that, research and overall knowledge on land in the region is still, still needs to be developed. Still a weak civil society organization to push for reform. And last but not least, lack of data. So what can be done? So definitely, the analysis on the political economy and where the different stakeholders is an important first step. We need to see where there is traction, and therefore, what is the sequence of reform that could take place, considering the powerful stakeholders and opposition that we see in the region. It will be very important to partner with civil society organization and have the support of civil society organization to promote land governance reform. And we need to make noise. I know there are already some several initiatives in the region, but definitely we need to do more. We need to really bring attention to the importance of this agenda in the region, and help, of course, develop the knowledge and the research throughout the region. And again, last but not least, address existing data constraints. And that's where we're really excited to see the Prindex being launched, and hopefully this together with some of the other data and some of the other knowledge in the region will really help to move this agenda forward. So thank you very much. Let me stop here, and back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you to highlight how important tenure rights are for the sustainable development of societies and the challenges of land administration systems around the world, in particular in the Arab world, and the legal and the glitches in the legal systems. Also, thank you for reminding us the importance of access to land data and land records that is at the very heart of our work at the Land Portal, and how data can really drive change, and if they have meaningful, if they can channel meaningful information, they can really inform decisions. As Prindex data is doing. Let me remind you that you can use the hashtag Prindex 2020 in Twitter if you want to tweet about this event. And there are also a few questions already in the chat. Please, I want to encourage you to put your questions to the panelists using the Q&A space. There is already one question for you, and if you want to respond right away, they are asking if the World Bank has any projects in Tunisia. Maybe you want to respond right away to this question, Anna.
Yes, sure, Laura. No, unfortunately, we have no project in Tunisia at the moment. So we would love to do that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there will be more future work in the region. As there is also one question to you, Shahad, you or Malcolm. Let me just pose the question right away, as is referred to your presentation and the statements about the findings for Palestine. I see Malcolm has responded, but maybe you want to respond using the audio, Malcolm. The findings find out that the insecurity was too low, and which could be interesting to explore further. Some panelists said, someone from the audience said that it doesn't reflect the reality on the ground. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more, Malcolm or Shahad? Either one of you, please.
Thank you very much for the question and the comment. At this point, we are simply reporting the findings from survey data, which was carried out in the second half of 2019. The survey was a module within the Gallup World Poll, and interviewed a nationally representative set of adults in Palestine, including all different tenure types. So this is the result that came from that polling result. We are also, I think, somewhat perhaps surprised by that number. We, having worked in Palestine, I think I'm, have been aware of, major threats to security of property rights and major concerns. So we would definitely like to dig deeper into the situation. We would welcome to discuss with researchers and policymakers, activists in Palestine about these numbers, and potentially look into getting additional data. But at the moment, we're simply reporting what the survey has indicated.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you. So after this great presentation from Anna and who presented also the great work that the bank is doing in the region, let me now give the floor to Rafik Chowdhury. Rafik is an advisor at the moment. Currently, he's an advisor for the Arab Union of Surveyors and also consultant supporting the Global Land Tool Network Arab Land Initiative, as well as a consultant for the World Bank. He's been for many years an organizer and facilitator of the Federation of Francophone Surveyors, which include more than 25 countries. Over to you, Rafik.
Thank you, Laura. Let me share the screen. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to speak after the World Bank. I mean, the World Bank is such a reference for everybody. So, fine. Thank you very much for the attendance of all these eminent personalities who are attending this gathering and then this debate. And thank you for having invited me. So, I am also a co-lead of the GLTN's professional cluster. I was just re-elected a few days ago, so I mean, that was new. So just for the record. Let me start my presentation with a reminder of what was written a few years ago by the UNDP about the research in the Arab world. I personally have put these quotations on the screen because I consider that Prindex is a contribution to the debate on land administration and land governance in the Arab world. And so I took it from the scientific point of view, if I may say, and the research. Any research can be discussed and should be discussed. So we are in the in the framework of such a discussion. So I consider that it's important as such to have such indicators for the following reasons, because as it has been written in the first Arab Human Development Report, and I would encourage everybody to read it again, published by the UNDP, I think it was 2003. It has highlighted how weak knowledge bases and stagnant knowledge development condemn many Arab countries to fragile productive power and reduced development opportunities. This is a big challenge in our area, including for land, of course. So, and the report continues and says, if Arabs aspire for advanced knowledge in all spheres of creativity and innovation, freedom is a must. Of course, freedom is a very scarce thing, unfortunately, in our Arab world. If Arabs seek human development through knowledge, freedom is the first and all-defining step. Thus, freedom and knowledge are central equations of human development. Freedom of opinion, speech, and assembly are the key freedoms that guarantee other forms of human liberty. A climate of freedom is an essential prerequisite of the knowledge society. So, in this spirit, I'm going to discuss, to make a preliminary some remarks about Prindex, and hopefully to maybe open some at least theoretical perspectives. One other essential remark in my point of view is that the R&D expenditures in the Arab world are very weak. And we have a lot to do in this regard. So, and here I'm quoting a report by the UNESCO, which is the United Nations Economic Commission for West Asia, which covers, in fact, the whole Arab world. And they say, the report was published in 2019. It says the world average of R&D as percentage of GDP was 2.22% in 2016. Korea had the highest R&D expenditures as percentage of GDP, followed by the United States and Finland. The Arab countries do not invest in R&D expenditure efficiently. From the scarce available data, the highest percentage of GDP expenditure or R&D scored in the Arab region was in the United Arab Emirates with less than 1%. This is also a very important challenge. Anna has mentioned that the research was weak in the Arab world, and we have here, unfortunately, a confirmation of what she has already said. Now, let me just say a few words about the GLTN's Arab Land Initiative in the field of research and education. The GLTN in this particular field has engaged in a few activities, one of which is partnering with the NELGA North Africa. As you probably know, NELGA is a project that is supported by the African Union, and we have a Moroccan university, which is their correspondent, they're responsible for North Africa. I have seen Mr. Timulali in the room, if I may say. I'm sure he is involved in that with his colleagues. GLTN has also granted 17 research awards to students and young land professionals from the Arab region interested in conducting research on land governance related topics in one or several Arab countries. And we have two of them with us, in particular, Shahid and Ahmed. I think they are both, grantees of these this project. And this project is supported by the German cooperation. So, and we have also organized a webinar together with the Lebanese University in Beirut, entitled Towards a Postgraduate Program in Land Governance, Serving the Needs of Lebanon and Other Middle Eastern Countries, in terms of, well, with the aim of trying to build institutions capable of, developing research in Lebanon and in the region with regards to land governance. Unfortunately, you know, that Lebanon suffers from a deep economic and social crisis. So for the time being, it's difficult to continue in this way. But I mean, we have at least a human basis that is solid enough. Let me just start now with asking a few questions to Prindex. I have been looking at the Prindex indications, well, with a lot of interest and a lot of curiosity. It has the Prindex has the advantage of being a global approach. Very interesting. It can allow us to do comparisons between countries. So this is very precious, and also it's a very precious contribution also to the debate in our Arab area. I have, however, considered that these indications have some limitations. And my first question and my first concern is that, of course, land governance systems evolve with time, sometimes quickly. If you take the GCC countries, simplifying the property register system, registration systems. I mean, this is an example of how the systems can evolve. Therefore, I think we need, on the long run, updates of the current Prindex conclusions. And this becomes crucial, I mean, to follow up and to make comparisons and to see how things are moving ahead, if they are moving ahead, which we hope, of course. So my question is, of course, how is Prindex going to cope with this issue, this update according to well, to the coming years. My second question or concern to Prindex is the following. I have noticed important contradictions between Prindex and doing business concerning some Arab countries. First thing, while Egypt and Algeria are among the least performing Arab countries with regards to quality of land administration, they are among the most secure among Arab countries for Prindex. I am very surprised. I mean, Egypt is living in informality. I mean, how can we have a security in such circumstances? I need an answer. At the same time, Jordan, which has the highest quality of land administration index among Arab non-oil producing countries, is considered as highly insecure. Once more, I would like to understand why. Where does this insecurity appear? In which socio-economic category does it appear? I mean, we really need to have more information about the context. Another peculiar thing is that Prindex considers that Yemen, Morocco, and Tunisia have nearly the same level of insecurity of tenure. I'm very surprised because Yemen has nearly no land registry at all, while Morocco and Tunisia have a long, well, we can say a tradition of 50, 60 years, and Morocco has invested very much in upgrading its system. So, I mean, how come? I mean, I'm really curious, and I would like really to understand. So I think these are paradoxes that deserve to be commented and to be explained. In other words, this figure need an analysis per country to better understand each country's context from the tenure perception point of view, of course, which is the Prindex approach, which is a very fair and very interesting approach. A superficial analysis might even state in certain milieus that these results prove, between brackets, that human societies do not need land registration systems, since the worst country in terms of land registration, in terms of land registration system, have high level of tenure security, which of course I personally doubt in a way. So informality appearing that it is not as bad as feared by some. I think that there is a lot to do to understand and to get deeper into our analysis and about the different situations in the Arab area. So yeah, so we should therefore begin to fight simplistic attitudes by trying to highlight the complexities of land governance and get deeper into our understanding of the situations in each of these countries. And I think, and Malcolm has mentioned that, and I think this is a very important commitment for the future. Now, just to try to conclude, well, we need for the global land tenure network, as well as for Prindex, we need to set up, I mean, effective networks in the MENA region to develop in deeper, I mean, to develop deeper appreciation and comprehension of the situation there. And I call all of you to join the second Arab Land Conference, which is organized by the GLTN with under the patronage of the Egyptian Minister of Housing, Utilities, and Urban Communities, and with the support of with the contribution of the World Bank, GIZ, the NELGA, etc., the Swiss Cooperation, SIDA. So, I mean, a lot of people will be there. We hope to see you all in this important event, so that we can get to know each other better, hopefully physically, if the health situation allows, or at least in virtually. So you have in front of you the objectives of the conference. It will focus on the priorities of the Arab Land Initiative, promote collaboration and coordination, develop and share knowledge, develop capacities of individual organizations, support the implementation of land-related programs and interventions, etc. It will be a platform to discuss countries' experiences, present new research, foster high-level commitment, and to improve land management, and empower and develop the capacities of land stakeholders from the region. Yeah, so this is the website of the second Arab Land Conference. Well, I hope to see you there, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you to Rafik Chouri. Thank you for, first of all, thank you to remind all of us that free and democratic, and I would also add equal access to information and knowledge is a prerequisite for the sustainable development of societies, and so is also very true in the MENA region, in the Arab world. There are many challenges ahead of us. Thank you for also presenting the main activities of the Global Land 2 Network Arab Land Initiative and the upcoming second Arab Land Conference in February. Before introducing our next panelist, I would like to give the floor to Malcolm to quickly address some of your questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Rafik, for these reflections. Just very quickly, I think I would just first of all like to say, of course, that we see Prindex and perception indicators as only one element of a picture of what's going on in overall land governance. And so perception indicators by their nature are subjective and of course also need to be understood in a context of administrative data and legal data and a whole set of things. I think the probably some of the answers to the questions you're posing are related to the high degree of insecurity of renters in the MENA region as opposed to owners. And I think it's important that we disaggregate those because the reasons for insecurity are somewhat different, with renters usually feeling insecure because of economic constraints. And in fact, we did a little bit of sub-analysis in the Jordan case, where we saw that most of the insecurity was being driven from renters for economic reasons, whereas the owners were actually felt secure. So we can go into more depth on that. I would also just note, we really do want to make this something that will be repeated so that we can see and track that evolution. And also that while Prindex, we think, is useful to open the door to discussing these issues and comparing among countries, it really requires for us to make deeper progress on these issues, much more fine-grained national level data. And I hope that this event can also serve as an opening for us to start to engage more directly with local researchers and activists across the region so that we could do some of that deeper. But let me stop there and back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, and fully agree that having a deeper understanding of national tenure systems and context is really extremely important for any research. There is also another question on the chat related to the methodology for Prindex, and let me read it for you, Malcolm, if you want to address it now. I think we need to keep in mind that is from Clarisse Marsac, who is asking, I think we need to keep in mind that perception of tenure security are not exactly the same as actual tenure security. There is a debate on whether perceptions are an appropriate measurement. It's about a methodology. So you want to spend a few words here, Malcolm?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, again, I think that perceptions are a very important determinant of individuals' behavior, and they're very strongly correlated with things like investment into land, but they definitely don't tell the whole story. And we see that perceptions are very affected by immediate situations and local situations. For example, people who know somebody who has been evicted may have a much higher perception of insecurity than those who have not. So indeed, I think the perception indicators always need to be understood in a wider context of other indicators. But we think for making global comparisons, that perception is a very useful construct and one of the only ways to make a kind of broad coverage of these issues that can be compared across countries and across time.
Thank you, Malcolm. Let me just introduce the next panelist to this great discussion, Dina Naguib. Dina, she's an urban planner with experience in extensive research experience in the area of housing and planning. Dina worked for the Egyptian Ministry of Housing and the Egyptian cabinet, and she's a PhD candidate with a strong research focus in the area of managing and controlling the rapid urban growth and the use of natural resources in environmental planning. She's also consulting for GLTN, UN Habitat, and the NALGA. Rafik also mentioned NALGA, this very important network of universities in Africa. And what is most important is Dina contributed to the recent book about increasing access to land for the realization of development, peace, and human rights for women in the Arab world. So she will bring a very particular perspective of this particular group in the Arab world. Over to you, Dina.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody, for giving me the floor. So I also want to address that I have a past experience and contribution with the GLE in the EGM the high-level political forum in the World Bank for 2017 and 2019 about securing women's land rights in the SDG monitoring framework, and as well in the reporting for the UN Women for improving the quality of women land rights and the SDG indicators. So I thought about starting with going deep into conflicts over land access inequalities. But since the situation now that we are arguing about different data in the region for different countries in the region, so I thought about maybe introducing some of the countries about in the region. So I'll be sharing a small introduction about different contexts of land in the region. So the insecurity of tenure is not simply related to the formal title as complementing to Rafiq registration. It's not only to which the land ownership is controlled and disputed. So I have different examples from Tunisia, for example, for the possession of land, and they automatically, I'm sorry, but I can't see the presentation from the Zoom. This is my problem now. I just want to take this off. Yes.
Are you having trouble seeing your own slides, Dina?
Yeah, because the Zoom was just posing. So ownership is transferred automatically to the person or a group that owns the property or the land and exploits it. This is also called the ownership of possession. Otherwise, in the Egyptian law, if a person is in possession of the land for a period for over 15 years, is associated with the intention of owning the land. So some of the countries have adopted some of the Western legal systems, and it also varies from different countries in the region. To the next slide, we have another example from Sudan, for example. So the possession fulfills the condition. It makes the holder an owner. So the ownership is achieved either through registration or through continuing the position or continuing to enjoying it without the owner or the right holder to having the right to recover it. So these are just different examples in the region. And then I want to dig deep maybe into the conflicts over land access and inequalities for different groups in the Middle East and Africa and North Africa. So the emerging gaps between the legality and practice on ground results in practices outside the legal framework, increasing the conflicts over the insecurity of land and identity and control through the investments and the private sector, willingness against the local community, and distribution of access to land, for example, in the land grabbing. So according to the social and cultural impacts of the region, there is a history of lack of integration and inclusion of different groups. Maybe we will dig deep into the gender and youth in this presentation. So for the gender, there's discrimination against women according to the customs and traditions in the region, and there is lack of the system structure against the women's awareness about their rights in inheritance, marriage, divorce and separation, and also regarding to the management and the land governance, there are some issues regarding to the bureaucratic system. So understanding the gender responsive, we have to understand the pluralism of the tenure and lack of the security and land shelter, and the proper and the lack of the proper land dispute resolution mechanism and the access to land through the inheritance right, because of dominancy of the man, because men are dominating the scene. So there is some major problem in accessing the land through inheritance. Also the lack of economic capacity for women and segregated data, and lack of effective policy assessment resulting into unharmonized policies. So what are the main needs? So the needs for assessing gaps related to the gender in the land governance and ensuring the involvement of local actors within the government, especially the grassroots women organization and their positive involvement, and the need for multilateral projects and upscaling initiatives all through the region. So the inclusion of women's rights will ensure a national ownership and leadership as main keys, and gender sensitive as a key element for that. Strengthening their effective participation and claiming their land tenure, about scaling up and ensuring inclusive, transparent, and sustainable approach. So in general, land access is a major source of economic development and social security and dignity that should be enjoyed by both men and women, and in particular for this region because of the high discrimination against women. For example, even in employment, if you have some figures about Saudi Arabia, only only 20% of the rate of unemployment rate for women, especially in comparison to men, only 3%. So securing the land rights, increasing the social and political status, and improving their confidence will lead to peace, development, and economic wealth. Moving to the youth, with their uneven customary arrangement and the social and political constraints of leadership, once again, there's dominancy here, but it's for the elders. You can find that mainly in rural areas, in tribes, in different parts of the region. So the lack of involvement of the youth in the dialogue and the investment and the process of decision making is only led by the elders in the region, in the country. So also there's lack of information for youth and the dynamics of the local sector, and their access only is through employment and engaging only in farming. The lack of their access to the household is not guaranteed, and the main lack is, even if they access the land, they have a lack in the access to other factors like technical info, instruments like for farming and agriculture, financial services, and commercial credits, and the lack of data collection as a process and inadequate disaggregated data. So the main barriers are the limited access to land itself and finance and skills. So what are the essentials for the access? So again, talking about the inheritance and enforcing the rights for inheritance, and the research and evidence of youth access to land, understanding the gaps and predictions in supporting incentives for youth participation in data collection and this kind of practice, and identifying needs for designing responsive development strategies and appropriate approaches, which should be reliable, comparable, accurate, and including all different groups. Also, facilitation of youth involvement in different programs and the process of decision making, and strengthening their capacities for the cross-sector organizations, which was all mentioned by Anna in her presentation, and the access to finance and training and upgrading their skills. On the local level, trying to support the youth-led organization and involving them both on the urban and rural areas for friendly policy access, and improving the factors of reduction like guaranteed loans, services, land programs, and incentives. So the benefit of that to promote the economic investment and development growth, and boosting the agriculture productivity and increasing the employment rates and developing the careers, and limiting the tension between the disputed activities, both in rural lands mainly and also in urban areas, and practical strategies for promoting their access on social and political aspect, and working again with the local level and in urban and rural areas. So wrapping up about the importance of data collection and analysis for these groups is to increase the data availability for enabling a livable environment through the data analysis, and filling the gaps in research, responding to regulatory frameworks for policies and laws. Complementing also on other actors' data is very important, and generating the data to leading to good governance. Developing the capacity analysis tools and participatory research, and stimulated the focus on the identified areas of interest and the potential for their positive involvement in all groups, either the women and youth, and engagement in the process from the start, like a bottom-up approach. So just to end up this presentation, a comprehensive assessment is very important to the concept of tenure security, and the recognition of the framework of property rights, either through access or management or use or control, and the importance of the customary tenure systems. Also ensuring the responsible governance of the tenure as a key importance in achieving human rights, food security, reducing poverty, and social stability, and for the economic growth and the social development of the whole countries on the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you for this great presentation and for reminding us that there are more ways of enjoying tenure security and using land that goes beyond just formal titling, and this is particularly important for groups such as women and youth, and also to highlight the pluralism of tenure systems and the fact that many countries, de jure and de facto customary systems, they do overlap, and sometimes they create conflicts. And so I mean, these are all aspects that need to be considered in analyzing tenure system, especially when women are the target. We want to better understand these dynamics for this group. Let me just give the floor for 1 minute to Anna Locke, who is co-director of Prindex, and I see she's in the among the audience. Anna, you want to maybe make a few remarks, especially relating to the perception of tenure security. There are several questions. I see you try to address some of the questions from the audience. Maybe you want the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Laura, and it's been a pleasure to listen to all the presentations and see the questions. And this is, it's a very exciting moment for Prindex, because this is in the MENA region, we know that land issues are becoming more and more discussed, and this is so it's very exciting to be part of that process. I think a quick point on perceptions. As you know, I'm an economist myself, and I've seen a real surge of interest in behavioral economics, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years. And subjective subjective data such as perceptions is becoming increasingly important in in a whole range of research. So I think we need to, as you know, as Malcolm has been saying, it's not the be all and end all. They can change quite quickly. They are, you know, we do feel that's a very important contribution to thinking about why people behave in a particular way, and you know, what kind of interventions we need to put in place to make people's lives better and to contribute economically. That's it for me, but I'm really enjoying this, and I look forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. This is great addition to the discussion today. So I'm now presenting the last panelist for today. Ahmed Zahahan is our last panelist. Ahmed is an architect and urban designer by training, and also a researcher. He has more than 12 years experience in teaching architecture and urban design in several universities in the region. His work takes a more social justice approach to sustainability, informality, climate change, urban design and management practices, and reflects his commitment to changing the way urban development is theorized, practiced, and taught. Over to you, Ahmed.
Good afternoon. My screen is showing for everyone. Hello, can you see the screen? I'm just
yes, we can see the screen, and
okay.
we can hear you loudly. Thank you,
yeah.
Ahmed.
Good afternoon. My name is Ahmed Zaza, and I'm co-founder of Tentuba, which is a company that it has two arms, one research and the other is on-ground participatory upgrade that's concerned with social justice and fair housing, especially targeting deprived and marginalized communities. In my presentation today, I'm trying to have like an overview on the situation in Egypt concerning the tenure and how Prindex can be like a potential for breaking some of the really big obstacles, as it was said in the previous presentations. So I'm going through an overview on the urbanization condition in Egypt and the magnitude and complexities, eviction challenges, and the potentials for gathering and digitizing tenure information. So first of all, to start with, like in Egypt, we are living mostly on less than 10% of the population, that it's all gathered around or inside agriculture regions. So as you can see in the map, the whole red shaded part, it's where most of the population is concentrating, and especially, of course, in Cairo or Greater Cairo region, which is on its own, it's including around 1/5 of the population. So just to, I'm trying to zoom out a bit, yes. Just to understand the typology of the Egyptian cities, it's more like, there's always a historical core, and this core, when it was urbanized, it was mostly surrounded by agriculture land, and then there are always these kinds of expansions, more and more until it reached the desert with desert cities. So the first problem here we have is that there's always like a change of use of the land from agriculture to other activities, mostly residential. That's why maybe like Prindex, when they started to have like a number for the perception of tenure in Egypt, it was relatively low, and that I believe that was Rafiq was pointing out, and I think here it's always the problem that people they think that, yeah, we have a legal tenure, but if you're looking at the legal documents, no, it might not be actually legal. So there was a project that Tantuba was working on, led by my partner Yahya Shaukat, and it was about mapping built environment deprivation index all over Egypt, which was by city, and it showed like a real problem and very high percentages of insecurity of tenure, but mostly you can see the disparities between cities. So some of the cities they have only like Sinai, for example, 7.5% are deprived from tenure security, but in another city in Delta you can find like 92% they are deprived from legal security. And again, there's a lot of urbanization happening in the Delta, especially. As you can see, there are more than 4,500 villages are being urbanized and changing the nature and the function of the land to another function, which of course it's making putting more complexities on understanding the tenure in most of Egypt. So most of these expansions, they are mostly informal, and again, as was what Rafi was trying to point out. And according to the GIZ in 2009, 65% of the built environment is informal today. So so again, there is this. I'm trying to show the magnitude of informality because it's in direct proportion with the security of tenure. And there are more complicated issues, like, for example, just an example, we have like around 1.5 million Egyptians who are living in cemeteries. So we're speaking about not only like a tenure problem of a land or a house. No, there are certain activities with certain license, and people they are changing them. So of course it again it affects the tenure of the people. In parallel to that, there are the state, they are like on the run for building more and more new cities, where these cities are mostly to relocate people from informal areas so that they can start living in a more secure tenure. But actually, the problem here, which is the main challenge here, is that the lack of tenure, it's proportioned with the amount of evictions that's happening in Egypt, because of course, if the most of the residents in informal areas, they don't have legal tenure, so of course they're always like prone to be relocated directly without with minimum negotiations, actually, and sometimes with no negotiations. They're just, you don't have legal papers, okay, you will have to submit to our alternatives, and sometimes most of the times the alternatives are not adequate, actually. And there is this project, or it's more of a national program to have Egypt it's called Egypt Without Slums, and the government now, they are tackling around 351 unsafe areas, how the government they call them, to be relocated. So we're speaking about here like what will be the tenure status for these residents, and how it will affect them in their relocations. And from a first-hand experience of a project that I was taking part of, which is Maspiro project. It's a neighborhood in downtown Cairo, where we were trying to upgrade the neighborhood and stop eviction and relocation of the residents. So when we were doing our surveys or interviews or focus groups, we were always finding that there is a huge percentage of the people who think that actually, no, they have a legal tenure here to stay in Maspiro. But of course, when it comes to papers, again, most of the residents were actually told that no, they don't have legal papers, but they will be they will be part of the negotiations. However, they don't have the legal papers, and I think it's one of a kind project because it took. There was a little bit of negotiation about it, but of course, the rest of the neighborhoods sometimes it's happening with no negotiations at all. So to sum up this, from the built environment deprivation index that I mentioned before, it was there were certain recommendations. They're mostly going with what Anna was just saying about modernization of Egyptian property registration and more of finding, working on the policy level and trying to introduce laws to recognize informal tenures and other laws or other policies to prevent any kind of tenure problems in the future. So actually, to reach this, I think there's always juxtaposing the legal tenure with the perceived tenure will be very important to produce a new definition that actually such definition can lead to like developing more policies or developing more adequate policies and more tailored policies that can fit the Egyptian cases. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Thank you for this very important perspective on tenure security in cities and urban context. This is enriching the debate and in a world that is growing more and more urbanized, and so and all the challenges that acquires different meaning, no, and it becomes very different in this urbanized context. So thank you so much. Before taking some of the questions from the audience, I wanted to give the floor briefly to Wael Zakut for a quick remark. He's a World Bank Senior Technical Advisor and Global Lead for Land and Geospatial. He worked in more than 30 countries, including in the MENA region. So over to you for a very quick remark, Wael, as we are almost at the end of the webinar. Thank you, Wael.
We're not hearing you well, sorry.
Oh no, okay, we have audio problems. While you try to solve your problems, well, let me just pick up some of the questions from the audience. There is one important question that I would like to address to the Prindex team, but probably also to the other panelists. In the context of the agenda, 2030 agenda, can we compare perceptions of land tenure security with the official government data, so the SDG land indicators, especially in regions where the official government statistics are incomplete due to underdeveloped, incomplete and land administration and management systems? This is a very relevant question. Who would like to take it? Malcolm, you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Absolutely, we think that perception of tenure security can be a very valuable complement to other official and administrative data. We think it can perhaps give a more inclusive view sometimes because it can take into account a number of different types of tenure relationships. But I think it's very important to have both types of data as to monitor and track progress in the Agenda 2030.
Thank you, Malcolm. There is another question from Niels Sorensen. who is asking whether there is any correlation between perception of tenure data and the Global Democracy Index. Is that possible to make any correlation between these two indexes? And is there any application in the MENA region in particular?
Actually, yes. When we've done a correlation with global governance index and corruption indexes, we see that they are actually relatively closely correlated. There's also a connection between insecurity and income level of countries.
Let me broad a little bit, ask some questions to the rest of the panel. To you, Anna, Dina, Rafik. Do you think that Prindex data can be used in your work in the MENA region? Is there any concrete applications or research focus that came to your mind when listening at these discussions and presentations? Dina, you want to say something?
Of course, data collection is a very vital and important element in this process. I think there is a great need to overcome the significant cultural barriers in the region and the causes that of the factors that are rooted in different countries around the region. So I think it's not an easy process, but the data collection should be on starting like what I mentioned, bottom up, on ground with local actors who are grassroots for examples for grassroots for women and for youth-led organizations, just to ensure the reliability of the data that is collected and to make sure that also that the gender it differs less across the different parts of the country in each country of the region, since there's it doesn't show similar regional concentrations because every for the Gulf it's different than the Middle East and also for North Africa. And each, as I presented, that some of the countries has different laws. For example, when we see Palestine, we have this sort of conflict inside Palestine, and there's West Bank and Gaza, and each of them affiliates to different laws. For example, the West Bank affiliates to the Egyptian law, and Gaza affiliates to the Jordanian one. So this is the important that we don't have to generalize to take it by context for each part of the region, and each country is a different case. And I think, like I said, that we have to work bottom up to reach a good governance at the end.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you so much. There is also, yes, please, Rafik. Yes.
Yeah, I want to say that one very interesting aspect of the work done by Prindex is to take into account the renters, which we seldom hear about. So I think this is a very interesting contribution, and there are renters in the Arab world that are in a very fragile situation, such as in the Gulf states, for instance. So I mean, this is very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. There's another question, I think, for the Prindex team. Is there any usage of Prindex data at the national level, for example, in the ongoing national land strategy formulation process in Morocco or elsewhere? So we're talking about usage of example of usage of Prindex data, which is maybe early, but.
To date, very little usage. I think we've had an interesting discussion in Jordan, particularly around this issue of insecurity of renters, and but I wouldn't say that we're seeing so far real actual uptake of Prindex as a reporting tool or a policy tool. So that's one of the reasons that we're really trying to engage more and in the MENA region, and have Shad now working to try to connect more with data users, including governments.
Thank you so much. It was a very rich and diverse debate, many different perspectives, gender, urban tenure, and then the different constituencies. I want to give the floor to the Prindex team for some last remarks before we close the webinar. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure, though, if Wael Zakut had solved, was able to connect.
Sure.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, please. Well,
yes, please, Wael, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, you know, I got a new computer and still have a problem with it. You know, anyway, just a few remarks from my side. First is really congratulate, you know, Malcolm and Chad and the entire, you know, Prindex team, you know, for, you know, the event, but also really in the bigger picture on Prindex. This is the first time, you know, in many years. In fact, actually, probably I don't recall we ever have, you know, a global data set, you know, on, you know, perception for property rights, you know, and clearly the, you know, in addition, of course, you know, to the you know, doing business, you know, part. But let me very quickly, I know we are very short of time, you know, go through the, you know, few reflections from my side. One is very clear, you know, that the MENA region lags behind, you know, other regions, you know. This is really came from the doing business, you know, indicators, you know, but also Prindex, you know, which is really from, you know, our understanding. The second is, you know, the land insecurity, you know, in the region has contributed to many of the regional ills, you know, in my view. You know, the bad governance, elite capture, you know, the weak economic growth, weak, you know, job opportunities, you know, conflict displacement, you know, and so on. So this is clearly, you know, if the region is going to move forward, in my view, this is something need to be on the cornerstone, you know, of the reform agenda. Now, the good news, I will say, you know, over the last few years, you know, we have seen, you know, some progress, you know, where certain countries or a few countries, you know, have managed actually to, you know, to start the reform, you know, process. You know, you know, I can say it's clearly Saudi Arabia is moving forward with the major modernization program, property registration. Morocco has, you know, started a major program of reform. You know, Egypt is talking about it, and I hope it will happen. You know, Palestine, we initiated the program, property registration. So I think this is something which is, you know, I call it is really promising. You know, there is at least the, you know, I think what Anna mentioned about causing the noise, you know, for the importance of property registration is starting actually, you know, to happen. Now, on the, you know, Arab Spring, you know, when the Arab Spring happened, you know, in 2011, you know, we, you know, hope that the major economic change will happen afterwards. Sadly, you know, clearly did not happen. I mean, you know, we know the, you know, the major economic transformation in Eastern Europe happened after the transformation and the, you know, the political system, you know, was engaged, and I think together with Malcolm in Indonesia after Suharto, you know, when the major reform on the property registration happened, you know, afterwards, as well as actually many other places. So clearly, this is my view. I mean, it's we need in the region to reflect, you know, and really demand, you know, I call it you know, an economic revolution. An economic revolution, fundamental part of this economic revolution, clearly, you know, the improving the tenure security, you know, and modernizing property registration. Clearly, you know, this is only one pillar of it. You know, many other pillars of the economic and social revolution need to take place. You know, despite the difficulties which we see in the region today, I'm always optimistic. You know, and you know, and I hope, you know, with the Prindex information, you know, in the region, you know, as well as the research, education, and other elements which we talked about, or the speakers talked about, you know, will help, you know, both the policymakers, you know, to understand, that there is absolute need, to reform the property registration, but also the grassroots, the civil society, the academia, the researchers need to really to come from the bottom up, demand, for better, security of tenure, as well as better services to citizens with regard to the tenure security. So I'm hoping will be, the Prindex is the one very important, piece, of the broader, initiatives which we launched a few years ago, with the GLTN on the Arab land initiatives. Looking forward very much to continue the conversation during the second Arab Land Conference, which will be coming, in February, as Rafiq mentioned. Let me stop.
Thank you. Well, I would like to go for a quick round of closing remarks from our panelists. One sentence, what is your main takeaway from today? Let me start with Anna. If you have any closing remark.
Thank you, Laura. I think Wael summarized it very well. So I think we can all, collaborate to push this agenda forward. And again, to repeat, what we said before, to make the noise and to make sure that, demand comes up for what is really, a critical issue for the region. So we're really looking forward to that. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Dina, over to you for your remarks.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you all the panelists and Prindex, of course, for giving the floor for such a fruitful and productive conversation today. I'd like also to focus on, we are going to expand our work in the Arab region with Prindex. I hope that would be a potential in the next few years. And also the challenge is against the root causes in the Arab region. So we have to keep it in mind always. Working with the governments and on high level management is part of it. And for me, I'm more pro to starting also with the bottom, as I said, with the organizations working on ground and measuring the perceptions bottom up, just to ensure a good governance at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Rafiq Chori, over to you. Any closing remark, plans for future collaborations?
Thank you, Laura. First of all, I was very happy to have this very rich discussion and very enriching from different points of view with the contributions of all of us. I hope this will lead to further cooperation and your disposal to discuss anything like that. It's too early to say that I have a project immediately, but I hope it will come up. Thank you.
Of course, of course. Ahmed, over to you for what is your takeaway from today's discussion? So any ideas for future collaboration with the Prindex team?
Yeah, of course, like we would be super excited as we are actually tenure is one of the things that we are focusing on in Tantuba. And I believe working on the ground and showing there are huge gaps between the perception and the legal real tenure. I think it's super important to just let us all know how big is the problem. Of course, it will be a little bit challenging on how to work on the ground, but I believe that I would be very interested to be part of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And then I'll give the floor to the Prindex team to sum up and make your final remarks. And of course, I want also to hear from Shahad on future plans and what is in the pipeline for other Prindex webinars for the coming weeks and months. Over to you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you everyone for participating today. This was really an interesting discussion. Prindex is not going to stop here by only presenting itself to the region. We are carrying on our work further by contributing to the Arab Land Conference in a side event in collaboration with the ILC, with UN Habitat and GLTN. We are also in the process of writing the Arabic regional report, which would aim to analyze some of the data we have collected in the Arab region. And we are also looking towards having some deep dives in the region, Egypt, of course, among one of the deep dives we are intended to carry on. Apart from that, we are working now on enhancing our network in the region by giving some training with the Rashida Transparency next week, and collaborating with other organizations on the ground. And I would like to use this opportunity here to extend our call to all interested stakeholders in the region to reach out to us and build up a bigger network that we can analyze our data further and carry on some national deep dives to be able to answer the questions we're asked today and have a better understanding of the tenure security and insecurity in the region. Hopefully we can in the future change that to tenure security overall, and the MENA region doesn't stay at the bottom of the list of insecurity with 28%. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now over to Malcolm for some closing remarks. And Malcolm, what is your takeaway from today and your wish for the future?
Well, thank you everybody for participating. I think the takeaway is that there is a big need for collaboration in the MENA region to focus on the needs in the land area and property rights, and to do so from the bottom up and include all social groups. And I think these indicators and data are one small part of that, but by joining forces with all the different interested groups and stakeholders, I think there's a real desire to make progress and a real opportunity for that. And then I would just close by really thanking all of the participants who've taken time today to join. We really look forward to engaging, as Shad has said, so please let's be in touch. And through the conference, I want to really thank the panelists for all the effort to participate today and bring out these perspectives, and to the discussants as well. I'd like to thank GLTN and the Arab Land Initiative for their interest and supporting the webinar, and then also very much thank the Land Portal and Laura for moderating today. So thank you very much, and we look forward to being in touch as we go forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. So it was a great debate. Thank you. We learned a lot. We look forward to more webinars and more discussions like this. Thank you for your participations, everyone. Thank you.